morning, afternoon, night to everyone, and God bless. How is everyone doing? It's a bit gloomy where I am right now, but nonetheless, calm, quiet morning. I hope everyone is doing well as well. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Today I'm going to be talking about Isaiah 30. And good morning. Good morning. Talking about Isaiah 30. Um, and as usual, I'll be going through, kind of stopping at parts that I wanted to analyze a little bit more. So I will be doing that. Before I begin, I wanted to, you know, um, give like the usual announcements that I usually do, in terms of the prayer chain. In the comment section, whether you're watching this live or after the fact, comment the prayers that you would like prayed for, so that we can all pray for you, for others, because of how important prayer is. Just want to emphasize that each and every time, because it just really is important to do that. Excuse me. So, all right, I'm gonna get started. So this is Isaiah 30, and lately I've been playing the Bible app before I go to sleep. I'll pray, and then I will let it play and just go to sleep to that. And so a couple nights ago, I think when I was going over Isaiah 43, I woke up to that verse and then shared that. And so this was another verse that I woke up to. It was kind of like end of 29, beginning of 30. So I just wanted to go over. Yeah, I have Isaiah 29, verse 24 highlighted. It says, "And those who go astray in spirit will come to understanding, and those who murmur will accept instruction." So it kind of just reminded me of, there might be some of you out there that are praying for the deliverance and salvation of people who have gone astray. And so when I woke up hearing that, because I have been praying that for certain individuals in my life, certain people in my life, that I care for and love, and would love to see, see their deliverance through. So that was pretty, that was reassuring to wake up to that. And then really the continuation of Isaiah 30, it kind of just fleshes out like the whole point of not going back to where you used to be, and understanding what will happen if you do, or if you choose not to abide by God. I'm going to just get started and then we'll go through it, because there is kind of a lot to unpack here. Okay, so this is Isaiah 30, verse 1. "Ah, stubborn children, declares the Lord, who carry out a plan but not mine, and who make an alliance but not of my spirit, and they may add sin to sin, who set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my direction, to take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt." And so for this part, just from jump, it's Egypt is symbolizing the place that you used to be that God has taken you out of. A place that has nothing for you, that can't help you, and we'll get into that later. And so what I feel is being said is, there's this lack of trust and faith in God that makes you decide to go back to where you used to be, to find some type of temporary comfort, uh, like a temporary fix. And Egypt is used because it's just like the Israelites who lacked faith in God, and after He brought them out of Egypt, He allowed them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they didn't have that faith and trust in Him, even after He brought them out of the place that they were once in, the struggles and the battles that they were facing while they were in Egypt. And so this is kind of, this warning to say, going back to Egypt, it's not going to help you. Going back to the place that you used to be in, it's not going to help you because God has already brought you out of that. So why? And you were struggling in that place. You might not have seen it then or understood it fully while you were in it, but now that you're out of it, you could see, okay, that was a place that I wasn't supposed to be. And now you're in this waiting period. You may be in the wilderness right now on your way to the promised land, but some may be tired of waiting, so they decide, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back. And this is a warning to not go back, because if you go back, you could, who knows how long you'll be there. You'll then start to depend on the Lord less and worry more about now this place that you've gone back into that the Lord has already brought you out of. So there's that urgency, that warning to not go back. Do not go down back to Egypt, back to the place that the Lord has brought you out of. And so this goes on to Isaiah 30, verse 3 is where I'm starting. Therefore shall the protection of Pharaoh turn to your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt to your humiliation. For though his officials are at Zoan, and his envoys reach Hanes, everyone comes to shame through a people that cannot profit them, that brings neither help nor profit, but shame and disgrace. This is verse 6. An oracle on the beasts of the Negeb. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Though a land of trouble and anguish, from where come the lioness and lion, the adder and the flying fiery serpent. They carry their riches on the backs of donkeys and their treasures on the humps of camels, to a people that cannot profit them. Egypt's help is worthless and empty. Therefore I have called her Rahab, who sits still. Now, I wanted to highlight this part, just going back, just emphasizing that the place that you used to be is not going to help you move forward. And so Rahab, I know that there is an actual Rahab in the Bible, the woman who hid the spies. But there's multiple meanings of this. And so the meaning I feel is relevant to this chapter specifically, the Hebrew meaning, which means wide or spacious. So it's saying Egypt is worthless and empty. When you think of just a wide, spacious place, there's nothing there. It's barren. It's empty. Egypt is worthless and empty. There's nothing for you. Therefore, I have called her Rahab, who sits still. Nothing is happening. And then it also got me thinking of, when you think of Egypt, the place that you used to is in the past. So it's behind you, and you can't change anything from the past. So it's sitting, it's still, it's in this still frame. The past is still, right? You're in the present. Things are moving towards your future. So if you're in the past, nothing is moving. You can't move or change anything in the past. So this wide, empty space that sits still, that's in your past. It can't be moved. It can't be changed. There's no point in going back there's no point in going back because there's no help that can be gotten from that place. There's no help that you can attain from going back because there's no movement there. There's nothing left there. So that's how I saw that part. Um, and I believe so that's the end of that first part. This is the next part where it's titled A Rebellious People. So this is Isaiah 30, verse 8. And it says, "And now go, write it before them on a tablet, and inscribe it in a book, that it may be for the time to come as a witness forever. For they are a rebellious people, lying children, children unwilling to hear the instruction of the Lord, who say to the seers, 'Do not see,' and to the prophets, 'Do not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us smooth things, prophesy illusions. Leave the way, turn aside from the path. Let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel.'" I'm going to continue on. This is verse 12. "Therefore, thus say the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perverseness and rely on them. Therefore, this iniquity shall be to you like a breach in a high wall, bulging out and about to collapse, whose breaking comes suddenly in an instant." And I wanted to talk about this part briefly because it's talking about, this is verse 13, right before it says, "Because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perverseness and rely on them. Therefore, this iniquity shall be to you like a breach in a high wall." And I looked up, like I said previously, like specific words I like to really dissect and go into, like what is actually being said here. So I looked up the word breach, and it has two different meanings. Breach, an act of breaking or failing to observe a law, agreement, or code of conduct, or a gap in a wall, barrier, or defense, especially one made by an attacking army. I feel both of these can apply here. In terms of the second one, it says a gap in a wall, barrier, or defense, especially one made by an attacking army. So there's, people who are unwilling. This unwillingness to know God, learn about Him, will lead to a life plagued with wickedness, with unrighteousness, with sin. And this word breach, it's not only like a sliver that the enemy can like sneak into and like kind of get like a foothold onto. It's a gaping hole. It says a breach. Breach is a wide, a gap. It says a gap in a wall, barrier, or defense. And so when you think about how the Bible is literally our lifeline, when you're far away in spirit, you have this gaping hole in you that's allowing the enemy to feed you negative thoughts, feed you unrighteousness, and allow you and cause you to sin. And so, yeah, filling your mind with all types of iniquity, and hardening your heart, hardening the hearts of those who refuse God. So, and then it talks about in the next part, or still in the same part, bulging out and about to collapse, whose breaking comes suddenly in an instant. Suddenly, like it can happen at any point. It's so unpredictable, and even those who follow, and it kind of goes on to the same theme as like, the second coming of Christ. Like we have no idea when that's going to happen, so it kind of ties into that as well. And then the next part says, which is just a continuation, "And its breaking is like that of a potter's vessel that is smashed so ruthlessly that among its fragments not a shard is found with which to take fire from the hearth or dip up water out of a cistern." It says smashed so ruthlessly, and we know that the devil comes to destroy and to kill and to steal away God's children, to turn their minds against Him, to destroy them. It says it's so ruthlessly. Fragments are not found. And there's, obviously there's significance in that, because when you turn away from God's instruction and you allow the sin and wickedness and unrighteousness into your life, allow that, allow the devil to get into your thoughts, get into your mind, to cause you to sin, it just ties back to, this breach, this gaping hole, when you're not abiding in God, when you're not relying on him, when you're not trusting in him, when you decide to go back to Egypt because you're tired of waiting on him. Now I'm going to get to waiting because it comes up in this. So I'm going to continue on. This is Isaiah 30, verse 15. For thus said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. So in returning and rest you shall be saved. In returning, it says as like a footnote, or repentance. So when you repent, when you rest in God, you will be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Literally just another way, pretty much the same way of saying, when you repent, when you ask for the Lord's strength, when you rely on him, when you trust in him, you will be saved. And then the next part, it says, but you were unwilling. You were unwilling. And you said, no, we will flee upon horses. Therefore you shall flee away. And we will ride upon swift steeds. Therefore your pursuers shall be swift. 1,000 shall flee at the threat of one. At the threat of 5 you shall flee, till you are left like a flagstaff on the top of a mountain, like a signal on a hill. So I just want to go back. You are unwilling, it says. Not wanting to wait on him, like I was talking about before. You're unwilling to see through the promise that God has made you. You're so wrapped up in how this world has trained us to seek and pursue quick results, temporary fixes, instant gratification, things of that nature. And so that causes you to be unwilling to wait for him, unwilling to wait for the things that he has promised you when you trust and rely on him. Excuse me. And so there's this fleeing, running away from the source, the one source that can actually help, and restore you. But again, it's this unwillingness that allows you to run to the temporary fixes, allows you to run to the instant gratification, the things that are fleeting, that are temporary, that are not going to last. And so it's easy to say that this produces like this stubbornness, and impatience. You're just so quick to run away and find something that will immediately, but very temporarily, people don't understand this, it will immediately, yes, fix or aid what you're struggling with, but it's not going to last. When you don't have a strong foundation, when you put your trust in something that's temporary, it's not going to last, right? So, and it also talks about this one part, therefore your pursuers shall be swift, quick. Pursue means to follow someone or something in order to catch or attack them. So when you think about it too, this part is saying, I'm going to just read it again, where it says, you were unwilling and you said, no, we will flee upon horses. Therefore you shall flee away. And, excuse me, we will ride upon swift steeds. Therefore your pursuers shall be swift. It's saying, what you're seeking will also come after you too. So, and it also says that at the beginning, adding sin upon sin. So when you're going out and you're pursuing sin, it will pursue you right back, because you're that gaping hole. You're allowing without God's instruction and his guidance, you're allowing for that to come in. And so, as it says, you will be so ruthlessly destroyed, so ruthlessly smashed. And it's because what you are seeking will also seek you and pursue you. And if you're seeking sin and wickedness and an unwillingness to abide by God's instruction, then what's going to come after you is the enemy and destroy you. That's what's happening. And it talks about that a little bit more in this last section of this chapter. So I'm going to just read from verse 17 and continue on. 1,000 shall flee at the threat of one, at the threat of 5 you shall flee till you are left like a flagstaff on top of a hill, like a flagstaff on the top of a mountain, like a signal on a hill. Therefore, this is verse 18, therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you. Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are those who wait for him. So it's the opposite of what was just said. When you wait on God, when you are not impatient, but patient and wait on him, trust that when you seek him out, when you rely on him, he will be gracious toward you. He will show grace. The next part says, this is the very next portion, verse 19, for a people shall dwell in Zion, in Jerusalem. You shall weep no more. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. As soon as he hears it, he answers you. So Zion and Jerusalem, they're the promised land. And dwelling in the Lord's presence, trusting in him when you're going through tough times, he will hear and answer you. And so this next part, verse 20 says, and though the Lord give you bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore, but your eyes shall see your teacher, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. So, adversity, difficulties, misfortune, affliction means something that causes pain or suffering. We're all going to go through that at some point in our lives. We're all going to experience pain, experience suffering, difficulties, misfortune. And I emphasize this too in a recent video that I made, that there's going to be even more than that when you're seeking out God, because the devil doesn't want you to be seeking God. So those attacks, the difficulties, the misfortune, it's going to be the temptation, it's going to happen even more because you are seeking out God. So saying, and though the Lord give you, he's allowing you to go through, he's allowing you to go through these difficulties, these misfortunes. Yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore when you seek him, but your eyes shall see your teacher when you trust in him, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right or to the left, meaning you're protected when you trust in the Lord, when you really surrender and just like you're saying, Lord, I'm giving this all to you. I'm giving it up to you. I can't do this on my own. He will guide your path when you give it to him. The path that you're on, when you say, Lord, take this, just show me where to go. I trust in you fully. I surrender to you. He will guide you. He says, this is the way. Walk in it. When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, when you cry out to him during the difficulties and the misfortune, through the pain and through the suffering, he's gracious and will guide you. And then the next part says, 22, verse 22, and you will defile your carved idols overlaid with silver and your gold-plated metal images. You will scatter them as unclean things. You will say to them, be gone. So this will cause you to rid yourself of the unclean things of the carved idols, because you realize that you don't have to go back in the past again, because there's nothing for you there. There's nothing that's going to help you. Egypt is worthless. It's empty. And so the things that you used to idolize, for example, it could be materialistic things, but even things like when you allow worry and fear and anxiety to consume you, to rule your thoughts, that's a form of idolization. You're idolizing these things over God, over the peace and the trust and the strength and guidance that he can give you. So when you realize this, when you allow God to guide your steps, you can rid yourself of these things. You can say, I don't need to worry. I don't need to stress. I don't need to fear. These things are from the enemy. So and that's signifying that you are trusting in God fully, because you no longer idolize, you no longer put these over who God is. You don't prioritize them anymore, because you realize they're not important. They're not helping you in any way. They're only trying to harden your heart, cause you to doubt God, cause you to be fearful and worry, to which then leads you to say, maybe I should go back to where I was comfortable, go back to Egypt. So it's all tying together. And the next part says, just reading on. Okay, so the next part is 23, verse 23. Now this part is interesting, and I highlighted it because it can go two ways. You can see this two ways. It's clearly talking about one way, and I'm just going to read this whole section here, and then I'll talk about which two ways it could go. So it says, and he will give rain for the seed with which you sow the ground. And he will give rain for the seed with which you sow the ground, and bread, the produce of the ground, which will be rich and plenteous. In that day your livestock will graze in large pastures, and the oxen and the donkeys that work the ground will eat seasoned fodder, which has been winnowed with shovel and fork. And on every lofty mountain and every high hill there will be brooks running with water in the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as light as the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold as the light of 7 days, in the day when the Lord binds up the brokenness of his people and heals the wounds inflicted by his blow. So this part at the beginning of 23, it says, and he will give rain for the seed with which you sow the ground. So I said this can go two ways. If you sow trust, if you sow faith, thankfulness for the Lord, you will be rich and plenteous spiritually. In all aspects, you will be rich and plenteous. You will be fruitful of righteousness, because you trust and have faith in God. Now, the other way that it can go, even though it's not talking about this, it talks about this in another part, in another book of the Bible. If you sow sin and wickedness and you continue, that's why this is so dangerous, to refuse God's instruction and refuse him in general and altogether. Why it's so dangerous, because if you sow sin and wickedness, he will give you over to that. And that will lead to destruction and death. The more that you stray away from God, that hole, that gap, that breach is getting larger and larger and larger, to allow the enemy to come in, to allow him to destroy, smash ruthlessly, so that no shard is found. Death. It leads to destruction and death when you refuse God. So those who are unwilling, this is like it's a cry to say that you have to, one, not go back to Egypt. To those who understand who God is but are impatient, they're growing a little bit impatient. It's like at that moment you have to catch it and say, okay, I have to get back in focus to God. I have to look to him and not allow that impatience to grow into this breach, into this gap that is going to allow the enemy to come in and allow you to go back into the life that you used to live, go back to Egypt. And it's saying, like I said, even though in this part it's saying, those who sow the seed of righteousness and thankfulness for the Lord and trust in him fully, they will be rich and plenteous. But on the other hand, if you sow the opposite of that, you will get the opposite of that. You will get destruction and death. You will continue to live the life of sin. And what I feel, just the importance of that and how dangerous it is, like I said, because it's not about just the physical. This is spiritual going on too. This is a spiritual warfare that's going on too. And so people who are in it, they might in the sin, unwilling, they're completely ignoring and refusing God. They won't and don't realize fully. They can't understand fully because they've strayed so far away from God. And that's why it's so dangerous, because even though it's not impossible for God to revive them, what is dead, it can be revived. And that actually, I woke up this morning to Psalm 85, and it talks about revival. I'm just going to read that really quickly because it just reminded me of this part. Even though the Lord will allow you to go into that, it's never too late, but to an extent, you have to understand that when you choose to completely go astray, it's up to you and the things that happen in your life to surrender to God. And I just want to bring up Psalm 85. The title of it says, "Revive us again. Lord, you were favorable to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave the iniquity of your people. You covered all their sin. You withdrew all your wrath. You turned from your hot anger. Restore us again, O God, our salvation, and put away your indignation toward us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger to all generations? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your steadfast love, O Lord, and grant us your salvation. Let me hear what God the Lord will speak, for he will speak peace to his people, to his saints, but let them not turn back to folly. Let them not turn back to folly. Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. Steadfast love and faithfulness meet, righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs up from the ground, and righteousness looks down from the sky. Yes, the Lord will give what is good, and our land will yield its increase. Righteousness will go before him and make his footsteps a way." So this was Psalm 85 that I read from. The revival, restoration. It's not impossible, because with God, all things are possible. This Isaiah 30 is a warning to say, do not go back to Egypt. Do not let that seed of fear and anxiety and doubt turn into a sliver, turn into a breach, turn into a gaping hole, to that point where, without even realizing it, you've gotten so far away from God that you begin to not worry or care about his instruction. And that's why it becomes so dangerous, because even though it's not impossible, it's difficult when you are so far away to come back. So don't even let it get to that point. Continue to focus on God. That's just the main overarching purpose of all of this. Continue to focus on God. When you trust in him, when you rely on him, when you have faith in him, he will make a way for you. He will tell you, this is the way, walk in it. That's it. That is pretty much what this is saying. This is a warning. Do not go back to Egypt. And I don't believe I finished the whole thing. I might have. Okay. I'll just read the last part. forgot where I stopped. Okay, so this is verse 27. I will read to, is it 27? Yes. I will read to the end here. Isaiah 30, verse 27. Behold, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with his anger and in thick rising smoke. His lips are full of fury, and his tongue is like a devouring fire. His breath is like an overflowing stream that reaches up to the neck to sift the nations with a sieve of destruction, and to place the jaws of the peoples a bridle that leads astray. You shall have a song as in the night when a holy feast is kept, in gladness of heart as when one sets out to the sound of the flute to go to the mountain of the Lord, to the rock of Israel. And the Lord will cause his majestic voice to be heard, and the descending blow of his arm to be seen, in furious anger and a flame of devouring fire, with a cloudburst and storm and hailstones. The Assyrians will be terror-stricken at the voice of the Lord when he strikes with his rod, and every stroke of his appointed staff that the Lord lays on them will be on the sound of tambourines and lyres. Battling with brandished arm, he will fight with them. For a burning place has long been prepared indeed. For the king it is made ready, its pyre made deep and wide, with fire and wood in abundance. The breath of the Lord, like a stream of sulfur, kindles it. So that's the end of Isaiah 30, and that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Overarching message, really, don't go back to the place that the Lord has brought you out of. Don't allow that seed of doubt and worry to cause impatience, to which causes you to fall back into that lifestyle that you used to live. Continue to pray for those things to be cast out, and just let God deal with it, because it's not something that we have to deal with on our own. It's not something that we have to face on our own. And it's so important to not be led astray, to not go astray, to not allow that fear and worry to overtake our minds, to idolize that, because it's difficult to come back when you get comfortable in that. Again, going back to the Israelites, they wandered the wilderness for 40 years. That's a long time, 40 years of just not having trust and faith in God to bring you to where he wants you to go, to bring you to the promised land. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I pray that this message reached those who needed to hear it today. I pray that you were able to take something from this. Again, this is like my interpretation of what this is saying, just how the Lord was speaking to me through this verse. So I thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all tomorrow for another Bible study. Thank you, and God bless.